Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. We have already discussed about the introduction part of Kubernetes volumes. So there we discussed already about what is the volume, why the volume is required in Kubernetes, and pretty much we discussed about what are the types of volumes in Kubernetes. So to continuation of that, in today class, we are going to discussing about the first type of volume in Kubernetes, which is called EmptyDir. In Kubernetes, containers are pretty much temporary. However, applications still need the way to share the data between the two containers. Now, the question here is where the data actually is parking or where the data is actually storing, how one container can talk to another container with help of volume, whether the data is stored inside the container or inside the pod or somewhere else. Okay, so since many people are keen on learning Kubernetes storage clearly, today we will understand EmptyDir volume using a live demo step by step in very simple way. Okay, so let's start with the basic scenario. Imagine we have a one pod and one pod has two containers, which is container one and container two. Container one generates some data and container two needs some data. However, containers are isolated. Containers file system is temporary. Containers can restart anytime. So Kubernetes says use a pod level volume. Okay, that is where EmptyDir comes into the picture. What is EmptyDir volume? EmptyDir is a directory that is created when a pod start and shared among all the containers inside that pod. Basically, volume belongs to the pod, not to the individual containers. Okay, so even it is not directly to the node as well. Why? Because volumes are treated as a property of the pod, just like a restart policy. Okay, so this is where most confusion eventually get cleared. And then we need to remember couple of important points clearly. Otherwise, it is very difficult to understand volumes in Kubernetes. Okay, so the first thing is EmptyDir are created when the pod is created. And the second one is EmptyDir exists as long as the pod is exists. Container restarted, even the data still be stay. And if the pod is deletion, data is deleted. Despite of how many times container restart, the data remains available with the same data. However, once the pod itself is gone, the data is also gone. That is where EmptyDir draws a clear boundary. Now let's see how the architecture will be there for EmptyDir volume. Visually, it's look like this. So we have a one pod, and inside this pod we have a two containers. Okay, so in between EmptyDir volume will be there. That is where both containers connect to the same volume and data is shared between them. So the communication becomes very simple for both container one and container two. This is where Kubernetes designs works very clearly. Okay, so let's jump into the live demo now. So imagine we are creating one pod, which is EmptyDir volume. And inside that pod, we are running two containers, which is C1, which is container one, and C2, which is container two. And here we are using the Docker image is Ubuntu latest image. Now, normally, if you run a container, it start and exits quickly. Since we want to go inside the container and test the things, which is EmptyDir volume, so that we keep it running using the sleep mode, which is 1000 we have given. That is just to keep the container alive for our demo testing. Now comes to the interesting part. We define one volume at the pod level and we name it as a share. Okay, SHR is share. Okay, so here you can see under the volumes, the volume name is share and the type of this volume is EmptyDir. What Kubernetes does is the moment the pod is created, it's created an empty folder for this volume. This folder is not inside any container yet. It is belongs to the pod level. Now with same volume and attach it to the both the containers. inside the container 1, we mount it as /temp share. See here, mount path. And here in the container 2, we mount the same volume at /temp data. Okay, so basically it is the same storage, just visible at the two different paths in two different containers. Now, when I go to the inside container 1 and create a file, I am actually writing into that EmptyDir volume, since container 2 is also connect to the same volume. When I go to the inside container 2 and check /temp data, I can see the same file. So let's execute the live demo and see now. Now, here are the commands which we are going to use for current demo. If you practice this command, that will be enough actually. Okay, so this is the file. Just now we discussed about the code base. Okay, kubectl apply -f emptydir.yaml and kubectl get parts. Now the part is created and the containers also it is running. 2 by 2 means this part has the two containers and two containers are in a running state. Now what we can do, we can check the volume initially. The output will be empty. Why? Because the volume has just been created. There is no data available. Okay. So for that, kubectl exec and you can give the pod name, then -c, then you have to give container 1 and -ls/tmp share. Okay, now see it is empty. And in the container 2 also we mounted as /tmp data, and here you can change the container name. Now see the output is empty. Now what you can do, you can go to the container 1 and create the file. Now let's see here, I can create volume.txt file. So if you want to create the file, you can use touch command. Okay, so touch space and you can create the txt file. So the moment the file has been created, you can able to see the container 1 has the file is available, and you can go to the container 2 also, you can see the volume.txt file is available, because the EmptyDir will share the data between container 1 and container 2. Now the file is available in the both the containers. And what we can do this time, we can create the file from container 2, and let's verify whether the file is sharing or not. So what we can do here, I can put the mount path is /temp/data. Then here I am creating test.txt file, and this is the container 2. Earlier we used to create from the container 1. Now we created from the container 2. Once the file is created, just list the data. See, the container 2 is listing test.txt, and this should be talk to the container 1 with the EmptyDir volume. Now let's go and list the container 1. The file will be shared. Now see, both the files are there. Now both files are visible from the container 1 and container 2. Basically, both the containers are sharing the same data. Now let's see what happens if container restart. As we already discussed, this EmptyDir volume is for pod level, it's not for the container level. If any container restart, pod is still running, EmptyDir volume also still exists, data is still same available. That is because of EmptyDir is attached to the pod level, not the container level. So this is where we did not lost the data. So in the next scenario, we will see what happens if the pod is deleted. So now delete the pod, kubectl delete pod, and you can give the pod name. So the moment if you execute this command, the pod is deleted, and after that if you can use the replica, it will be automatically created. So once the pod is created, EmptyDir is created again. directory is empty because old data is gone. As I told, EmptyDir volume is pod level. It's not the container level. If pod is deleted, volume is deleted, old data is gone. Now if we see again, kubectl get pods, see here no pod is there. Again, if you can try to create the kubectl apply -f EmptyDir volume, now the pod is created, it is running, and if we go and see the data, or if list the data from container 1, it is empty. Even container 2 also empty because pod is deleted, volume is deleted. Okay. Eventually, you understand this rule. EmptyDir data lives only for the lifetime of the pod. If the pod is deleted, volume is deleted. So when you should use this EmptyDir? So the EmptyDir can be used. You have multiple containers in one pod. You want to share temporary data between those containers. You are implementing sidecar container or init container patterns. So that case, you can use EmptyDir for epiformal. So you should not use the EmptyDir when the data must be survived even if the pod is deleted. That means if you delete the pod, the data should be available. That case, you cannot use the EmptyDir. And even if you need your data long-term storage, that case also, this EmptyDir is not suitable. So despite of being simple, it must be used correctly. So that is where you want to share temporary data between multiple containers in only single pod. That time you can use the EmptyDir. Okay, kubectl delete -f emptydir.yml. This can be cleaned up everything. So it can be deleted the containers, volume, which is EmptyDir. Okay, so coming to the conclusion, EmptyDir is for temporary data sharing between the containers inside a single pod. So once you understand, this is where it fits. Kubernetes storage become much easier to follow. If this EmptyDir demo helped you and understand storage clearly, could you please like, subscribe, and comment. Next, we will see the other type of volume, which is called host path. Okay, thanks for watching.